showed me the fence that he and his father had built in the backyard. And he made me look at the back of the fence and rub my hand along the back of the fence. And he said, my father told me we had to make the back of this fence just as beautiful as the front of the fence. And little Steve had said, well, why? Nobody's ever going to notice it. Nobody will see it. And his father, who was a high school dropout auto mechanic, loved designing, detailing cars, said, yes, but you will know. And Steve said that taught me that if you really care about beauty, you even care about the beauty of the parts unseen. So when they were doing the original Macintosh, Steve cared so deeply about the beauty of that thing. You know, when he first showed it to me when I was a young reporter at Time magazine, late 1983, he comes to show it off, makes us use a jeweler's loupe to look at the pixels on the screen and the icons they're creating. He makes us see the wonderful case, the sealed case that he had sort of picked up from looking at Cuisinarts, Cuisinart machines at Macy's, the beautiful curves and the chamfers of it all. But as they were finishing making that machine, around that time, the fall of 1983, Steve looked at all that stuff, thought it was beautiful, but then looked at the circuit board they were working on for inside, and he said, this circuit board sucks. And of course, the engineers are a little bit taken aback. He says, the chips are on, they're not lined up straight. They don't look beautiful on the board. They said, Steve, you know, that's not how you make a circuit board. Plus, you put it in a sealed case. Nobody's ever going to see it. Nobody's ever going to know. And Steve told him the story of his father. And he said, yes, but you will know. So they hold up shipping that original Macintosh for about 4 or 5 weeks until they could redesign the circuit board so that inside of this case you can't even open, it would be beautiful. And when they did finish, Steve had them take a whiteboard, and all of them, all 30 engineers on the original Mac team, signed their names with Stephen P. Jobs, in lowercase right in the middle, and they engraved it on the inside of the case, where nobody's ever going to see it, nobody's ever going to know, but he said, real artists signed their work. The other thing that I think is a key to innovation in the digital age is the ability to collaborate. You know, people said, well, Steve Jobs, he was a strong cup of tea. He was always telling people what jerks they were. You know, he wasn't very good at, you know, collaboration or team building. No, totally untrue. And one of the themes of my book is, although he's tough on people and he drives them crazy, he also drove them to do things they didn't know they'd be able to do, and thus they become deeply loyal to him. In the early days of the Mac team, they used to give an award each year, the team members, to the person who best stood up to Steve Jobs. You will, I hope, not be surprised to know that the first 3 years running, it was won by a different woman each time. There was always a woman who would stand up to her, and they all got promoted. They became, if you saw the movie, you know, one of them is Joanna Hoffman and Debbie Coleman, who became head of manufacturing. Anyway, that is how he developed a great team. In fact, near the end, when I was asking him, what's the best product you ever created? You know, I thought he'd say the iPod or the original Mac or maybe the iPhone. He said, you weren't listening to me. You know, creating a product is hard, but what's really hard is creating a great team that will always produce great products. The best thing I ever created was the team I built around. And they were more loyal than all these nice bosses you hear about in Silicon Valley. That team at Apple for 15 years with Steve, and the second round he was there, would have walked through walls with him and stayed real close to him. This notion of collaboration is something that, you know, hit me when Steve Jobs was talking about it. It reminded me of the very first book I did with one of my friends. We were just sitting around, we were about 22 years old. We wrote a book called The Wise Men, which was about 6 friends and how they had helped create American foreign policy after World War II. Don't feel bad about not having read it. It's not exactly the most, but it was about teamwork and collaboration. And ever since then, I've written biographies. And we biographers have a dirty little secret. We know that we distort history a little bit. We know we make it sound like some guy or some gal goes down to a garage or a garret somewhere, and a light bulb moment happens and there's innovation. But that's not how it works. Creativity is a team sport. Innovation is a collaborative effort. And if you take the two greatest inventions of our time, the computer and the internet, nobody, with all due respect to Al Gore, knows who invented them. Why? Because they were invented collaboratively, as a group collaborative effort. This is something we are now teaching in universities. This is how to be a team player, how to create team, how to collaborate. When I went to university, that was called cheating. And now it's called collaboration. If you look at the computer, really the first computer that's general purpose, electronic, and programmable is ENIAC at the University of Pennsylvania. But the first person to come up with the concept and to start building a computer was a guy named John Atanasoff at Iowa State. The problem with Atanasoff is he was a loner. He didn't know how to build a team around him. He didn't have mechanics. Whenever he had a problem to work out, he got into his Oldsmobile and drove sometimes miles and miles all the way to the Illinois border so he could think. I also think he went there because you could buy alcohol by the drink in Illinois and not in Iowa back then, so he went to a bar. But he came up with most of the concepts of how you apply Boolean algebra into a circuit-based switching system and create a logical thinking machine. But the punch cards didn't work, the burners were hard, the mechanical drum got up because he did. Then you get somebody like John Mauchly, who is a true collaborator, a true builder of teams, and he realized that building the computer wasn't hard, but building the team that could build the computer was a difficult thing. So he traveled around America and went to Bell Labs, to Dartmouth, where people were doing things, Harvard, where Sir Howard Aiken and Grace Hopper were working on a mechanical machine, numerical calculator. And even went to the World's Fair and then drove all the way to Iowa to meet this guy Atanasoff. Spent 4 days looking at his machine, taking notes. Those of you who are lawyers know what happened. There was a 17-year patent dispute between the two of them afterwards. But as Mauchly said, no, I wasn't stealing things. I was collaborating. I was working together. So he goes back to the University of Pennsylvania and he creates a team of 70 people, of engineers, gets as his sort of top partner, the person whose grandfather had invented the Turkish taffy machine. People who know how to make things, people who know how to keep them working. 6 great women, PhDs in math to help do the programming. And it was through that teamwork that they were able to create the machine. Likewise with the internet. The internet was begun by the Defense Department in the United States in order to connect the big, expensive computers that they were funding at various research universities. And they came up with the packet switch notion of a web where packets would go scurrying about with header blocks and connect these machines. But then they told the research universities, you've got to figure out the protocols that will tell us how we're going to do this, so how your machines are going to actually connect to this network. Being research universities like this one, they did what research universities always do, which is they delegated the task to the graduate students. And the graduate students, about 35 of them, got together every now and then, and they would create what were going to be the rules and regulations for the internet. But being the way they were, and this is sort of the late 1960s, Vietnam War, people are kind of resistant to authority, they don't like hierarchy and top-down things. They decide to build it extraordinarily collaboratively, with nobody, no hierarchy, nobody in charge. In fact, they picked the youngest of their lot, a guy named Steve Crocker, to take the notes, because they don't want to have anybody saying, okay, I'm in charge, here's what we've decided. And he just tried to figure out, what am I going to call these? He didn't want to call them regulations, sounded too authoritarian. And he finally called them requests for comment. In other words, they'd come up with an idea and they'd call it a request for comment and they'd send it out. And if nobody objected, it became sort of adopted. Now that's really cool that that's how the internet was developed. But what's particularly cool is that it's still being built through the RFC process. We're about 7,900 in the RFCs, all done collaboratively. You don't know who runs the internet or the W3, the World Wide Web Consortium, but it's this collaborative effort being done with sort of a crowdsourced mentality. At one point when I was at Time Magazine, we wrote about this. We said that the decentralized or even distributed nature of the internet was done so that it would survive a Russian nuclear attack. You know, if you're attacked something that's like a telephone system that has, you know, central hubs or a hub and spoke model like an airline system, you take out a couple of the hubs or the central switching stations and you can screw up a network. But the internet and its corollaries like the web, you take out one node and it just routes around it because it can scurry around anything. It means that it can't be attacked. We got a letter from Steve Crocker, but I had no idea who he was at the time. Said, no, I helped write these things up. We didn't do it, you know, to survive a Russian attack or to help the Pentagon. You have to remember, we were graduate students. Why were we graduate students? We were dodging the draft, you know, so we were doing this so that nobody could control the internet. Time Magazine was arrogant back then, I know, because I was there, and did not print his letter and said, we have a better source than you. I didn't remember this, but years later I'm working on the book, he's telling me the story, and he says, I wrote this letter. I said, oh, you know, I vaguely remember that. And he said, yeah, and you didn't print the letter. So I went back to my friends who are still at Time. I said, get me the folder out the archives. I want to see who the better source was. Well, the better source was actually a guy named Stephen Lukasich, who ran DARPA and was in charge of funding the money. So I talked to him and he said, yeah, we were doing it to survive a Russian attack so that, you know, this would be safe. But we didn't tell the graduate students that, you know, they wouldn't have, you know, go along with that. So they didn't know. So you tell Crocker, he said, that I was on the top and he was on the bottom, so he didn't really know what was happening. I go see Crocker, have coffee with him, I tell him the story, and he strokes his chin, he says, you tell Lukasich that I was on the bottom and he was on the top, so he didn't know what was happening. That's the essence of the distributed innovation that you have in a digital world. And that's the essence of what you have to do in an innovative ecosystem like Toronto and Waterworld together. So that type of passion is what caused innovation to happen. Steve Jobs, of course, was famous, or infamous at times, for his passion. He had around him what people sometimes call the reality distortion field, meaning he could get so passionate about something, he would just stare and push and make it work, even though it was impossible. It starts at the very beginning, with the original with him and Woz when they were at Atari trying to do Breakout, a video game, and he tells Woz, tells Woz, who knew how to program, you got to program it by the weekend, because we got to go back to the apple farm where they were working.